All right. Hello and welcome back, everybody, to our conversation series on remote work. My name is Ken Kahn, and I am the Director of Partnerships and Collaborations here at Eye Technologies, where we help people with video communications. So we're on our fifth conversation in this series. Far, we've talked about some general statistics around remote work, a perspective shift on work, some success tips, and then the last two conversations, we discussed possibilities for why remote work is being implemented and then mandated against. As always, I'm here with my friend and colleague, the person you really want to see and hear from.
I'm Roxanne. I'm Director of Marketing and Learning with Eye Technologies, and delighted to be in this conversation about remote work. And for today's conversation, we're going to be looking at fully remote work. So let's start with a definition of that. So the way we're frame fully remote means that there's no physical office space. So most of the time when we think of that, it would be working from home. We hear a lot of the return to office as opposite of work from home. But another thing could be from a co-working site or any other non-office location. So it's basically chosen by the employee. What do you think? Did I get it, Ken? Do you have things to add to that?
I think you nailed it. I think if I tried to give my own, I would probably just be repeating a lot of what you just said.
All right, so we're off to a good start then.
I'm going to chalk that up in the win column. So in relation to that too, we're going to talk quite a bit today at different times about asynchronous and synchronous as well. And so we want to talk about how that relates to remote work. You did so great on the fully remote work. Why don't you tell us, how would you define asynchronous work or synchronous work?
Get out of my head, because I was like, are you going to define that before you go into it? Because anytime I say, oh, synchronous and asynchronous, people are like, wait, what? What are you talking about? So these are kind of nerdy in the, working, especially in video conferencing space, because you think of video conferencing as a synchronous activity, as is in person. So it is synchronous when we are doing something and we're doing it at the same time together. It might be at the same time in person, or it can be at the same time remotely. We're all working together. You think of like a brainstorming session. We're in it, we're talking, there's back and forth. And it works really well if you're in the same or similar time zones. Asynchronous will be, we have something and we're not working on it simultaneously. You might have something else you're working on while I'm working on another piece of it. And so you think of it as a back and forth, perhaps, or just independent work. And then you have to think about, if you're working with a team and you're working asynchronously, how are you going to share that? And there's a lot that goes into it. There was a quote, someone said, it's easy to do remote work. It's very difficult to do asynchronous remote work.
I would say it can be. If you have very different time zones, you might say it's harder to do the synchronous work because it's harder to match up the time zones. It's kind of funny because, we've been doing video communications now. I think when we try to add it up, it was like over 25 years or something that I'm almost embarrassed to say when I say it. It's really been that long. How can that be when I'm not that old enough oh wait, yeah, I am old enough to have now been doing this for 25 some years. Yes, those words are like, I've heard them so much, I forget that lots of people, when they hear asynchronous or synchronous, they're like, what are you saying? What's this now? And those words too they can kind of get jumbled up. I'll say a lot async or sync, do the shorthand on that. I think you were reading my mind, because as you were defining it, I was like thinking async, independent work, sync, things you would do together, teamwork type things. But before we move on from this, we had a little bit of information about preferences, like people that like asynchronous or synchronous work. Which one do they prefer to do first? Which one do they prefer to do second? For me personally, and we had a little pre-talk before this, so I'll be curious to see if the theme continues, because we're kind of on opposite edges of some of this stuff, which maybe will be interesting for conversation. Async to me is my preference. I'm very introverted. I like to do things a certain way. So anytime I can do things independently, I'm a real thinker. I like to think things out. Like if people watched me do certain things, I would be embarrassed. They'd be like, did he really, has he been reading this one sentence for the last 10 minutes? And like, yeah, like as I'm reading it, I'm thinking about it. So I prefer the async work over the sync work. Cause for me, the synchronous work, teamwork, other people are involved in that. I might have to gear myself up for people time. So yeah, that's where I sit on that.
Which it's interesting that you mentioned because we do come at things very differently in some aspects, but as we have conversation, what I tend to find is sometimes we'll have a Venn diagram type thing of like individual preferences, but some commonality. And interestingly enough, the commonality here is, yes, I am a off the charts introvert as well. So sometimes the synchronous work, if I think it is unnecessary, then why are we wasting our time with something that's we're all here together. This took a lot of energy, and why? This could have been an email type situation. So
I was totally just thinking of that exact same thing. When you're in a meeting, you're like, this could have been an email. Why is this a meeting?
irritates me so much. And the other part is that my background in group development, I'm really interested in developing small teams and what you can do together with a small group, working with a small group of people. And how do we best use our choice of time? How do we choose synchronous activities or asynchronous activities to be most effective? And so in a fully remote work environment, it can even be a mixture of, instead of just picking, oh, we're always going to be asynchronous first as our default or synchronous first. I like to look at what the objective is. What are you trying to do? And when you look at it in context, so for instance, if I'm doing something that's going to be a longer term project and I have a group that's never been together and we're coming together and we've got some very specific things that we need to do, perhaps we have new technology, that kickoff and the way we start that group, I would use different times the synchronous and at different times asynchronous. I might do recorded video to walk you through the technology we're going to be using so everybody can practice that. It might be a written handbook or timeline that you can look at. It might be another recorded video. So some things that you could do, you could look at, study in your time. If you want to read the sentence, 10 minutes on one, you can really study, process it. And then before we get going with our work or whatever the work of the team is, have a synchronous time where we're coming together. We're just going to like check for understanding, Q&A, ask the things. And sure, you could ask them in a text-based format, but to have something that's real-time, synchronous, probably a video chat if we're all remote, we start to hear each other's voices. We would see each other's faces. So you're doing the really quick way of team building. You can team build asynchronously, but I think when you come together and it's well structured, then you can get further down the road more quickly. So agreement and disagreement with you. Would you disagree with which parts of that?
No, I would say we're mostly in agreement on there because, like you said, if it makes sense for us to do something synchronously, I'm more of a logical person. So my nature is I'm always going to want to do everything async, even to my detriment. That's why I'm like, okay, this isn't going to be good for you if you try to make this an independent thing, like you said. So I'll be, okay, even though I would rather this be async, this is a situation where we need to get on the call together, get on the video call together and talk this through or figure this out. So if it makes sense, I was going to say I'm all for it. There's still always going to be part of me that's like, but once we get going, I think I just talked to you about this the other day. Like I had a friend who I'm all about text. He's all about phone calls. And we had a situation where we needed to go over something. So he wanted to have a phone call and I'm like, we can handle this over text. And it wasn't happening. So it's like, I had to make the phone call. And it's the first 30 seconds, I'm just like, And then once it gets going, it's like, okay, yeah, this was the better choice because we had to figure out some logistics. There would have been quite a bit of back and forth. So it's like, okay, yeah. And so a lot of times what I end up realizing is like, okay, I'm not right in this situation. This needs to be synchronous.
I love that because we used to have some kind of, when we were doing jazz training years and years ago, was there something where we were like, okay, if you go back and forth 2 or 3 times and there's no resolution, it's time to move from asynchronous to synchronous. We'll talk about this more in the conversation, but you kind of be thoughtful about it. And I like how you say you're logical. You're still going to push back, and the other person can still have to justify it to you, but you are open to.
Well, a lot of times it's like the other person has no idea because it's just me like telling myself, get over it, just do it. And then I'll be like, yeah, later I might tell that person. And they're like, you didn't want to make that. It did not seem like that at all. It's like, yeah, I did all that by myself before we had the conversation. So you never even saw it.
Well, this is definitely a good kickoff for our fully remote work. So we know fully remote work. We've got a working understanding of synchronous and asynchronous. And now we're going to move into the next part of our conversation.
Next up, we talk about connection, and we'll give you some fully remote work tips.